The legend of Zik the Great, the hero of Nigeria. Once upon a time, in a land filled with vibrant colors, ancient traditions, and bustling markets, there was a young boy named Nnamdi. This land, called Nigeria, was a place of many tribes, languages, and stories. Nnamdi was born on a bright November day, in 1904, in the heart of the Igbo tribe, in a small village called Zangaru. From the moment he opened his eyes, it was clear that Nnamdi was destined for greatness. The early spark. Little Nnamdi grew up surrounded by the tales of his ancestors, the wisdom of his elders, and the love of his family. He was a curious child, always asking questions and seeking to understand the world around him. His father, Obadidim Chakwemeka Ezekiel, was a clerk in the British administration, and his mother, Rachel Chinua Ezekiel, a loving homemaker.
From my limited observation, I am convinced that the right atmosphere now exists for the negotiation of a just and honorable settlement.
Nnamdi Azikiwe was born in northern Nigeria, in Zungeru, present-day Niger State. As a young boy, he learned to speak Hausa, the main indigenous language of the northern region. Azikiwe was later sent to live with his aunt and grandmother in Onitsha, where he learned the Igbo language. Azikiwe attended Holy Trinity School, a romantic Catholic mission school, and Christ Church School while his father was working in Lagos. Azikiwe was beaten by a dog in Onitsha. His father asked him to come to Lagos to heal and to attend school in the city. He learned Yoruba language. By the time he was in college in Lagos, he had been exposed to a different Nigerian cultures and spoke 3 major Nigerian languages. Azikiwe traveled to United States, where he was known as Ben Azikiwe, and attended Story College, Columbia University, the University of Pennsylvania, and Howard University. He contacted colonial authorities with a request to represent Nigeria at the Los Angeles Olympics. He returned to Africa in 1934, where he began work as a journalist in the Gold Coast of Ghana. As a journalist, he inspired Nigerian and African nationalists. His activities encouraged them for self-government. Azikiwe became active in the Nigerian youth movement, the country's first nationalist organization. Although he supported Samuel Akinsanya as the NYM candidate for a vacant seat in the Legislative Council in 1941. The NYM Executive Council selected Ernest Ikoli. Azikiwe resigned from the NYM, accusing the majority Yoruba leadership of discriminating against the Ijebu Yoruba members and Igbos. Some Ijebu members followed him, splitting the movement along ethnic lines. He entered politics, co-founding the National Council of Nigeria and the Cameroons, NCNC, with Herbert Macaulay in 1944. Azikiwe became the council secretary in 1946. As a result of Azikiwe's support for a general strike in June 1945 and his attack on the colonial government, publication of the West African pilot was suspended on 8 July of that year. In 1946, a militant movement was established to defend Azikiwe's life and his ideal of self-government. Azikiwe did not publicly defend the movement, which was banned in 1951 after a failed attempt to kill a colonial secretary. Under the Richard Constitution, Azikiwe was elected to the Legislative Council in a Lagos municipal election from the National Democratic Party. He and the party representative did not attend the first session of the council, and agitation for changes to the Richard Constitution led to the McPherson Constitution. The McPherson Constitution took effect in 1951, and like the Richard Constitution, called for the elections to the Regional House of Assembly. He opposed the changes and contested for the chance to change the new constitution. Staggered elections were held from August to December 1951. In the Western region, two parties were dominant. Azukwe's NCNC and the Action Group elections for the Western Regional Assembly were held in September and December 1951. Because the Constitution allowed an electoral college to choose members of the national legislature, an action group majority in the House might prevent Azukwe from going to the House of Representatives. He won a regional assembly seat from Lagos, but the opposition party claimed a majority in the House of Assembly, and Azukwe did not represent Lagos. In 1951, he became leader of the opposition to the government of Obafemi Awolowo in the Western. Azukwe moved to the Eastern region in 1952, and the NCNC-dominated Regional Assembly made proposals to accommodate him, although the party's regional and central ministers were asked to resign in a cabinet reshuffle. Most ignored the request. The Regional Assembly then passed a vote of no confidence on the ministers, and the appropriation bills sent to the ministry were rejected. This created an impasse in the region, and the lieutenant governor dissolved the regional house. A new election returned Azukwe as a member of the Eastern Assembly. He was selected as chief minister and became premier of Eastern Nigeria in 1954 when it became a federating unit. Azukwe became the first indigenous governor general on 16 November 1960 with Abubakar Tafawa Balewa as prime minister, and became the first Nigerian named to the Privy Council of the United Kingdom when Nigeria became a republic in 1963. He was its first ceremonial president. Nnamdi Azukwe was removed from office in January 1966 military coup, and he was the most prominent politician to avoid assassination after the coup. Azukwe was a spokesman for Biafra and advised its leaders, Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu. During the Biafran War in 1967 to 1970, he switched his allegiance back to Nigeria during the war and appealed to Ojukwu to end the war in pamphlets and interviews.
I am convinced that the right atmosphere now exists for the negotiation of a just and honorable settlement, provided that Nigeria continues to ensure the safety of the persons and property of Biafrans as citizens of one united country.
After the war, Azukwe was Chancellor of the University of Lagos from 1972 to 1976. He joined the Nigerian People's Party in 1978, making unsuccessful bids for the presidency in 1979 and 1983. He left politics involuntarily after 31st December 1983 military coup. Nnamdi Azukwe died on 11th of May 1996 at the University of Nigeria Teaching Hospital in Enugu after a long illness, and was buried in Onitsha.
Nnamdi Azikiwe, the first president of Nigeria. Nnamdi Azikiwe was a Nigerian nationalist, journalist, and politician who fought bravely for Nigeria's independence. After Nigeria became a federal republic in 1963, Azikiwe wrote his name in the history books, by becoming the first democratically elected president of Nigeria. His presidency, which was characterized by tremendous gains in the health and education sectors, sadly came to an end following the 1966 military coup. For his undying support of Nigerian nationalism, black pride, and empowerment, he is generally considered one of the key founding fathers of modern Nigeria. This video presents the major facts and accomplishments of Nnamdi Azikiwe, the man who tried to restore the dignity and pride of the black man. Major accomplishments by Nnamdi Azikiwe. He fought hard to end segregation during British colonial rule. In addition to his numerous achievements, Azikiwe was involved in efforts to desegregate the Nigerian football leagues. He viewed segregation based on race, ethnic identities, and religion as an affront to the blacks. And even after Nigeria gained independence in 1960, he stayed at the forefront, fighting against people who wanted to use sports to perpetrate their diabolic political and ethnic agenda. Such was his pursuit of equality and justice in sports that he created his football club called Zeke's Athletic Club. The club was a place where people from all walks of life, religion, and ethnicity could come and freely participate in the beautiful game of football. The club even won the Lagos League in 1942. Following those successes, Azikiwe established several other soccer centers across the nation in a bid to promote national unity. Some African historians have stated that Azikiwe's football club laid the foundation of the Nigerian national team, which would later be dubbed the Super Eagles. He was a columnist for a number of famous African-American newspapers. Influenced by the famous Ghanaian educator James Emin Kwegyir Agray, 1875 to 1927, Nnamdi Azikiwe sailed to the United States to further his education. After a 2-year preparatory course at Storer College in West Virginia, he enrolled at Howard University, Washington, D.C. In 1932, he graduated with a master's degree in religion from Lincoln University in Pennsylvania. He followed this up with another master's degree from the University of Pennsylvania in 1934. He briefly took up a graduate student instructor job at the university before working as a columnist for famous newspapers such as the Baltimore Afro-American, Philadelphia Tribune, and the Associated Negro Press. His time in the United States also saw him become a disciple of Marcus Garvey's political, social, and economic policies, also known as Garveyism, founding member of the African Morning Post. Following his return to Nigeria around 1934, he had quite a challenging time finding a job of his liking. After failing to secure a teaching post at King's College in Lagos, he turned his attention to Accra, Ghana. He took up Alfred Okense's offer of senior editor at the African Morning Post in Ghana, formerly Gold Coast. As an editor, his professionalism was top-notch and beyond reproach, earning significant praise from his fellow journalists. He also took under his wings several journalists, inculcating in them a sense of black pride and Pan-Africanist ideologies. He was a vocal supporter of African culture and philosophy. While at the newspaper, he used the nickname Zeke in writing many of the articles in his very famous column, The Inside Stuff by Zeke. Nnamdi Azikiwe blasted Africans and the upper class who were bent on maintaining the colonial mentality. He was quite dismayed at their unwillingness to criticize the manner in which African youth were indoctrinated into thinking Western culture superseded the various cultures in Africa. Those ideas, Zekism, of his would later culminate in his book, titled Renaissance Africa, 1973. He also used the newspaper to caution against petty ethnic and tribal conflicts. In his book, he proposed 5 philosophical pillars that would underpin Africa's revitalization and growth. Those pillars are social regeneration, economic determinism, mental emancipation, spiritual balance, and risorgimento nationalism. Founded the West African Pilot. After his exploits in Accra, Ghana, he returned to Lagos in 1937. He went on to establish the West African Pilot in order to champion the nationalistic ideologies in Nigeria. Extremely fed up with the colonial system in the country, he set up a number of similar newspapers across the country to support his Pan-Africanist ideas. His Zeke group gradually became a leading player in journalism in the country. They managed, for example, the Southern Nigeria Defender, Inwari, the Eastern Guardian, and the Nigerian Spokesman. Every one of those newspapers came to be famous for its community-inspired stories. Azikiwe also didn't shy away from promoting women's rights in the various women's sections of his newspapers. By 1950, Azikiwe's West African pilot could boast of about 20,000 copies on a daily basis. He established the National Council of Nigeria and the Cameroons. Azikiwe's West African pilot was criticized by some ethnic and political groups because of what they believed were his undue suppression of some political figures in the Yoruba community. His friction with the Yoruba group started during his time in the Nigerian youth movement, where he accused